In this video, I'm going to go through two examples of how we actually compute the slopes of tangent lines using the formula that was covered in the end of the previous video. So here we go, the first example. Compute the slope of the line tangent to f of x equals x squared at x equals -3. So, I'll do the first one of these, and then I'll give you guys a chance to do the second one. What we do is we follow the formula that we had. So actually, I'd really like to write the notation for this, right? We want to find the slope of the tangent line to this function at this x value. So the notation for this, in terms of what it's going to be, the notation is I want to find f prime of -3. So remember, this f prime notation means you're finding the slope of the tangent line, and inside you just put in the x coordinate that you want to find the slope for. Okay? So that's what we want to find. So now at the end of the previous video, we got a formula, and that formula was that f prime of c was equal to the limit as h approaches 0 of c plus h, f of c plus h minus f of c all over h. And remember what this represented was, it represented two y coordinates, and then the distance in between those two, the two x coordinates of those 2 points, right? So for our purposes here, I want to find the slope at -3, which means I'm going to be using the -3 for all of these c values, right? So f prime of -3 will be the limit as h approaches 0 of f of -3 plus h minus f of -3 all over h. Okay? And now this problem should feel a lot like many of the others that we did in chapter 1 and in chapter 2. Right? So f prime of -3, chapter 1 and chapter 0, the limit as h approaches 0. So now, what is f of -3 plus h? Well, it means I plug -3 plus h into my function. So I'm going to get -3 plus h squared minus, and then this thing here, this f of -3, that means plug -3 into this, so that's going to be 9. And on the bottom I just have h. So those are my three pieces. There's the f of -3 plus h part, there's the f of -3 part, and there's the h part. Okay. So moving on, I'll now have f prime of I can't make that into a 3. -3 equals the limit as h approaches 0. Now I'm sort of going to work that thing out. This is 9 minus 6h plus h squared minus 9 over h. And this is where we see magic that we've seen for the past 2 chapters. This happens every time. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that. They subtracted out. Who knew? And then look at the stuff that's left. Oh my gosh, how surprising. One of the h's cancels out of everything. So what I have now, f prime of -3, is the limit as h approaches 0 of -6 plus h. And now that we're at this point, how do we take limits? We attempt to take the limit by evaluating the function for this value. When I put 0 in here, I end up with a very simple statement that f prime of -3 is -6. And there it is. Okay. By the way, I think it's worth mentioning that this answer makes sense. If you were to graph our original function, f of x equals x squared looks like this. If I were to look at the slope of the tangent line at -3, I think we would agree that a slope of -6 is totally reasonable. Like that's a reasonable answer for us to be getting. So that process that we just went through, that's how we find the slope of a tangent line. I've got one more example of that, and I'm going to ask you guys to do it on your own, so here it comes. So I want you to find the slope of the line tangent to that function at x equals 2. Right, so you should be able to follow exactly what happened in the previous problem and do that here. So pause the video and try that on your own. If you're scared, you can sort of try the first step and then watch me do the first step and then pause the video and you try the second step. But you need to keep yourself honest about sort of, going through and trying it step by step. So let's take a look. So I want to find g prime of 2. And that means I need to do the limit as h approaches 0 of g of 2 plus h minus g of 2 all over h. Now remember, that I want us to memorize this, but this should also make sense. We're doing this as I want to know what it is at 2, so let's look at the y-coordinate a little bit past 2 minus the y-coordinate at 2 divided by the little bit of change in x. Like, that's what that formula is actually doing, okay? So with that out of the way, we can plug things into this, right? G prime of 2 equals the limit as h approaches 0. Now right here, I need to know what g of 2 plus h is. So it may actually make sense for us to sort of set aside a little bit of space and figure out, like just on the side, what is g of 2 plus h? You know, I've noticed on, a lot of the work you guys are doing in class, some of the past quizzes and tests that we've done, a lot of us like to step to the side and sort of do this computation. It'll be 3 times 2 plus h minus 2 plus h squared. So if we sort of work this out, that's, oops, not 3, that's 6 plus 3h minus, if you sort of FOIL that out, 4 minus 4h minus h squared. It's incredibly important that you actually distribute that negative through that thing, so make sure you do that. It looks like some stuff can even be combined here. I'm looking at this being 2 minus h squared. And so this expression is what's going to replace this in my limit, right? So I'm going to have 2 minus h squared. Now we can move sideways back into the whole problem. So I've got that thing minus g of 2, so I just have to plug 2 into this. That's 6 minus 4, so minus 2 all over h. Okay, so then g prime of 2 is the limit as h approaches 0 of, well, again, surprise, surprise, 2 minus 2 is 0. And then actually all of these have an h in them, so I can even divide one h out of all of them. Got to be careful right there, though. Make sure you pay attention to the fact that that didn't completely disappear. What you have left is negative 1 minus h. Now finally we can take the limit as h approaches 0, which just means we evaluate this expression with 0 in it. Right? That gives me that g prime of 2 is negative 1. That's our slope. That's the slope of the tangent. Okay, that's the end of the videos for today. This was a big introduction to Chapter 2, and you'll see where this is going soon. For now, just get ready to have some practice with that tomorrow. I'll see you then.